The laughter stopped so fast you could hear a pin drop. Rosa Mae Washington stood at the marble counter, her withered hand holding a yellow envelope that made the bank manager's face go white. The same man who'd been smirking 30 seconds ago now stared at the papers like they might bite him. His mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. The young teller behind him took a step back, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear. Rosa Mae's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Now, about that withdrawal. 2 hours earlier, Rosa Mae had walked into First National Bank of Millfield with one simple goal. She needed to withdraw $5,000 from her savings account. Nothing fancy, nothing complicated, just her own money from her own account. At 73 years old, Rosa Mae had seen plenty of changes in this small Georgia town. She remembered when black folks couldn't even walk through the front door of this bank. Now she was a customer. Had been for 15 years. Never missed a payment, never bounced a check. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows as she approached the counter. Her best Sunday shoes clicked against the polished floor. She wore her navy blue dress with the pearl buttons, the same dress she'd worn to church that morning, the same dress she wore when she needed to look respectable. "Good afternoon," she said to the young teller. The girl couldn't be more than 25, blonde hair pulled back tight, name tag read Jessica. She looked up from her computer screen with the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How can I help you today?" Jessica asked. "I'd like to withdraw $5,000 from my savings account, please." Rosa Mae placed her worn leather purse on the counter. She'd carried that purse for 20 years. It had seen her through good times and bad. Jessica's smile flickered. 5,000? That's quite a lot. May I ask what it's for? Rosa Mae felt her shoulders tense. In all her years of banking, no one had ever asked her what she needed her own money for. "I'm sorry? It's just that we have policies about large withdrawals for security purposes." Jessica's voice carried a tone Rosa Mae recognized. The same tone she'd heard from store clerks who followed her around, from teachers who expected less, from neighbors who acted surprised when her lawn looked better than theirs. Security purposes. Rosa Mae repeated the word slowly. "I see." Behind Jessica, a man in a expensive suit watched the conversation. His nameplate read, David Mitchell, branch manager. He was younger than Rosa Mae expected for a manager, maybe 40. Clean shaven, wedding ring that caught the light when he moved his hands. "Is there a problem here?" he asked, stepping closer to the counter. Jessica turned to him with relief. "Mrs. Washington wants to withdraw $5,000. I was explaining our security protocols." David looked Rosa Mae up and down. His eyes lingered on her simple dress, her worn purse, her calloused hands that spoke of a lifetime of hard work. $5,000, he said. "That's a significant amount. Do you have identification?" Rosa Mae opened her purse and pulled out her driver's license. She'd renewed it just last month. The photo was clear. The address was current. She slid it across the marble counter. David picked it up and studied it like he was looking for forgeries. He held it up to the light, turned it over twice. "This address, Maple Street, that's not the best part of town, is it?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Rosa Mae felt heat rising in her cheeks. Maple Street was a perfectly fine neighborhood. She lived there for 40 years, raised 3 children in that house, paid her mortgage every month for 30 years until she owned it free and clear. "My address is current," she said quietly. "Oh, I'm sure at Allen." David handed the license back. "It's just at $5,000. Well, that's more money than most people in that area see in months. You understand our concern." The young teller giggled, actually giggled, like David had made a joke. Rosa Mae's grip tightened on her purse handle. She'd faced down plenty of men like David Mitchell in her time, men who thought they could judge her worth by her zip code, men who smiled with their mouths but not their eyes. "I understand perfectly," she said. "You think I don't belong here. Now that's not what I said. David's voice took on that patient tone adults use with difficult children. I'm simply following bank policy. Large withdrawals require additional verification. Surely you can understand that. What kind of verification? Employment records, proof of income, bank statements going back 6 months. He ticked off each requirement on his fingers. Tax returns would be helpful too. Rosa Mae felt the eyes of other customers on her. An elderly white man in line behind her cleared his throat impatiently. Two women near the loan desk whispered to each other behind their hands. I've been banking here for 15 years, Rosa Mae said. Never had a problem before. Well, you've never tried to withdraw this much before, have you? David's smile grew wider. Look, Mrs. Washington, I'm trying to help you here. This kind of money is just not realistic for someone in your situation. Maybe you misunderstood your account balance. It happens more often than you'd think. The young teller nodded eagerly. We could check your balance for you. Sometimes people get confused about what they have available. Heat flooded Rosa Mae's face. Confused, like she was some addled old woman who couldn't read her own bank statements, like she was making up stories about money she didn't have. I know exactly how much money is in my account, she said. David exchanged a look with Jessica, the kind of look that said everything without words, the kind of look that made Rosa Mae feel small and foolish and angry all at once. Of course you do, David said, but let's just double check, shall we? For everyone's peace of mind. He walked around the counter to Rosa Mae's side. His cologne was too strong, his suit too pressed. He gestured toward a row of chairs against the wall like he was herding cattle. Why don't you have a seat while we look into this? This might take a while. Rosa Mae didn't move. How long is a while? Hard to say. These things can be complicated, especially when the numbers don't add up. His voice carried that patronizing tone again. You just relax, and we'll get this sorted out. Behind them, the elderly man in line huffed loudly. Some of us have places to be, he muttered. David turned to him with an apologetic smile. So sorry for the delay, Mr. Henderson. We'll have you taken care of right away. Mr. Henderson got David's full attention. His warm smile, his eager assistance, no questions about his address or his right to his own money. Rosa Mae watched it all from her spot at the counter. The difference in treatment was like a slap across the face, clear as daylight and twice as ugly. Mrs. Washington, Jessica called from behind her computer screen. I'm showing a balance of, oh my. Her voice changed. The smugness disappeared. I'm showing. This can't be right. David hurried back to look at the screen. His expression shifted from confident to confused to something else entirely. What does it say? Rosa Mae asked. Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. It says you have $2,400,000 in savings and another $800,000 in checking. The lobby went quiet. The whispered conversation stopped. Even Mr. Henderson turned to stare. David's face had gone pale. That has to be an error. Run it again. Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard. No error, sir. The account shows regular deposits going back 15 years. Large deposits. Very large deposits. Rosa Mae reached into her purse, past her wallet, past her reading glasses, down to the bottom where she kept the yellow envelope she'd hoped she wouldn't need. Her fingers found the worn manila paper, the envelope she'd carried for 20 years, but never had to use, until today. She pulled it out slowly and set it on the marble counter, the same counter where David Mitchell had questioned her worth, where Jessica had giggled at the thought of a black woman from Maple Street having real money. There's something else you should know, Rosa Mae said. Her voice was steady now, strong. The voice of a woman who'd built an empire while everyone else was looking the other way. David stared at the envelope like it might explode. What's that? Rosa Mae's smile was small but sharp. The deed to this building. The silence that followed was complete, total. The kind of silence that comes right before the world changes forever. David's mouth fell open. Jessica stepped back from her computer like it had shocked her. Mr. Henderson's briefcase hit the floor with a thud. You see, Rosa Mae continued, I don't just bank here. I own here, have for the past 10 years, which means she let the words hang in the air. Let them sink in. Let David Mitchell understand exactly how badly he just messed up, which means you all work for me. David Mitchell's world tilted sideways. The words, you all work for me, echoed in his head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. He stared at the yellow envelope on the counter. His hand shook as he reached for it. May I? He asked. His voice cracked like a teenager's. Rosa Mae nodded. Go ahead. David's fingers trembled as he opened the envelope. Inside were copies of legal documents, property deeds, mortgage papers, all stamped and official, all bearing the same name, Rosa Mae Washington, property owner. The building address matched perfectly, 425 Main Street. First National Bank of Millfield sat on land that belonged to the woman he had just insulted. Jessica leaned over his shoulder to read. Her face went from pale to green. Oh God, she whispered. Oh God. Oh God. Other customers had stopped pretending not to listen. They crowded closer, craning their necks to see what was happening. The whispers started low and grew louder. Did she say she owns the building? That old black woman? Can't be true. Rosa Mae heard every word. She'd been hearing words like that her whole life. The difference was, today she had papers to back up her response. The deed is dated March 15th, 2015, she said calmly. I bought this building from Millfield Properties for $1.2 million. Cash. David's eyes scanned the documents frantically, looking for errors, hoping for forgeries, finding nothing but legitimate legal paperwork. But how? Jessica stammered. I mean, where did you get the money? Rosa Mae finished. Same place. Anyone gets money, child. I earned it. Mr. Henderson pushed forward from the line. His face was red with curiosity and something that might have been embarrassment. What kind of work do you do, if you don't mind me asking? Rosa Mae turned to face him. This man who'd huffed and puffed about waiting, who'd gotten immediate service while she was treated like a criminal. I own 17 rental properties in 3 counties, she said. Been buying them up for 30 years. Started with a duplex on Oak Street, used the rent from that to buy the next one, and the next one after that. The lobby was dead silent now. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. I also own Washington Construction. We built half the new subdivisions on the north side of town. The Hampton Hills development, that's mine. Riverside Commons, mine too. David's face had gone from pale to gray. He was starting to understand the scope of his mistake. And then there's the restaurant, Rosa Mae continued. Sweet Magnolias on 4th Street. Been serving the best fried chicken in town for 12 years. Maybe you've eaten there. She could see the recognition in several faces. Sweet Magnolias was famous. People drove from 3 towns over for Rosa Mae's secret recipe chicken and homemade biscuits. But that's not all, she said. Her voice was steady, but there was steel underneath. I own the parking lot where you all park your cars. The one behind this building, that's mine too. Been charging the bank rent for 15 years. Jessica made a sound like a wounded animal. The parking lot? $2,000 a month, Rosa Mae confirmed, plus maintenance fees. The contract runs through 2028. David's hands were shaking so badly he could barely hold the papers. He was doing math in his head, calculating how much rent the bank paid to the woman he'd just humiliated. Mrs. Washington, he started. His voice was barely above a whisper. I had no idea. Of course you didn't. Rosa Mae's tone was matter of fact, not angry, not gloating, just stating truth. You took one look at me and decided what I was worth. Old black woman from Maple Street couldn't possibly have real money. She reached into her purse again. This time she pulled out a leather portfolio, the kind successful business people carried. It was worn but well maintained. I brought my accountant's letter just in case, she said. My net worth is currently $4.7 million, give or take what the stock market did this week. The number hit the lobby like a physical blow. Someone gasped. Someone else whispered, Jesus Christ. Rosa Mae opened the portfolio and pulled out a crisp white letter on expensive letterhead. This is from Hartwell and Associates. They handle my taxes. They'd be happy to verify any information you need. She set the letter on the counter next to the deed. Two pieces of paper that completely destroyed every assumption David and Jessica had made about her. Now then, Rosa Mae said, about that $5,000 withdrawal. David scrambled to respond. Of course, absolutely, right away. He turned to Jessica with panic in his eyes. Process Mrs. Washington's withdrawal immediately. Yes, sir. Jessica's fingers flew across the keyboard. 5,000, you said? Would you like that in hundreds? 50s? Hundreds will be fine, Rosa Mae said. While Jessica counted out the money, David stood frozen beside the counter. His mind was racing through the implications. This woman could destroy him, could have him fired with one phone call to corporate headquarters, could probably buy the whole bank if she wanted to. Mrs. Washington, he said carefully, I want to apologize. My behavior was completely inappropriate. There's no excuse for how I treated you. Rosa Mae looked at him with eyes that had seen 73 years of life, eyes that had watched this town change, eyes that had seen men like David Mitchell come and go. You're right, she said simply. There isn't. The money counting seemed to take forever. Each bill Jessica placed on the counter sounded loud in the silence. The other customers watched like they were seeing history being made. And maybe they were. When the counting was finished, Jessica slid the stack of hundreds across the marble. $5,000, she said. Her voice was small and ashamed. Rosa Mae picked up the money and placed it carefully in her purse, right next to the deed that proved she owned the ground they all stood on. There is one more thing, she said. David's face went white again. Yes, ma'am? My lease agreement with First National comes up for renewal next month. The words dropped like stones into still water. David's mouth went dry. Jessica gripped the edge of the counter. The current rent is $8,000 per month for the building, plus $2,000 for the parking lot, Rosa Mae continued. That's $10,000 total. David nodded frantically. Yes, ma'am, that sounds right. Market rates have gone up considerably in the past 5 years, Rosa Mae said. Commercial property in downtown Millfield is at a premium now. She let that sink in. Let David imagine what new rent might look like. Let him picture empty offices and moving trucks. I'll be sending the new lease terms to your corporate office next week, she said, along with a detailed report about today's customer service experience. David's career flashed before his eyes. 20 years of banking, a wife and 2 kids at home, a mortgage and car payments and college funds to think about. Mrs. Washington, please, he started. If we could just... She held up one finger. The gesture was small but absolute. I'm not finished, she said. The lobby held its breath again. The report will include names, dates, exact quotes of what was said to me today. Her voice never rose above conversational level, but it carried the weight of consequences. Corporate will want to know why their Millfield branch thought it appropriate to mock and humiliate a customer who brings in more money than most small businesses. Jessica had started crying, quiet tears that she tried to hide behind her hand. They'll want to know why that same customer was treated like a criminal for trying to access her own funds, Rosa Mae continued. Funds that exceed the annual salary of everyone in this building combined. The truth of it was undeniable. Rosa Mae's $3.2 million in deposits probably exceeded what David, Jessica, and the other 3 employees made collectively. And they'll want to know how their employees reacted when they discovered their mistake. David opened his mouth to speak, but Rosa Mae wasn't done. I've been in business for 40 years, she said. Built everything I have from nothing. You know what I learned in all that time? She looked around the lobby, at the marble floors and expensive fixtures, at the customers who were pretending not to stare. at the employees who had underestimated her so badly. I learned that respect isn't about the color of your skin or the neighborhood you live in. It's about how you treat people when you think they can't hurt you. She closed her purse with a soft click. Today, you all failed that test. Rosa Mae turned toward the door, but David's voice stopped her. Wait, he called. Please. What? What can we do? How can we fix this? She turned back slowly. The afternoon sun streaming through the windows caught the silver in her hair, made her look like someone from an old painting. Someone important. Someone who'd been important all along. You can start, she said, by treating the next customer like they might surprise you. She walked toward the glass doors that led to the street. Her shoes clicked on the marble with the same steady rhythm as when she'd entered, but everything else had changed. Behind her, David Mitchell stood in the ruins of his assumptions, holding legal documents that proved just how wrong a person could be. The door was almost within reach when Rosa Mae heard Jessica's voice, small and desperate. Mrs. Washington, the new lease, how much is the increase going to be? Rosa Mae paused with her hand on the door handle. Through the glass, she could see her car in the parking lot, the lot she owned, could see the street where she'd built a business empire while everyone was looking the other way. She turned back one last time. Her smile was thin as paper and twice as sharp. You'll find out next week, she said, along with everyone else. The door closed behind her with a soft whisper of finality, leaving the bank in absolute silence except for the sound of Jessica's quiet sobbing and the tick of the wall clock counting down to next Monday. The parking lot behind First National Bank was quiet except for the sound of Rosa Mae's heels on asphalt. Her car sat under the oak tree in the corner spot, the same spot she'd parked in for 15 years, back when she was just another customer, before anyone knew she owned the ground beneath their feet. She clicked the key fob and heard the familiar beat of her doors unlocking. A modest sedan, nothing flashy. Rosa Mae had learned long ago that drawing attention wasn't always wise for a woman like her. As she opened the driver's door, footsteps echoed across the lot behind her. Mrs. Washington, please wait. She turned to see David Mitchell jogging toward her, his tie loosened and sweat beading on his forehead, despite the cool October air. He looked like a man chasing his last hope. Mr. Mitchell. Her voice was neutral, neither welcoming nor dismissive. Is there something else? He stopped a few feet away, breathing hard. Up close, she could see how young he really was, probably younger than her oldest son. Old enough to know better, but young enough to still think he could talk his way out of trouble. I need to ask you something, he said. Man to man, person to person. Rosa Mae almost smiled at that. Go ahead. Are you really going to destroy us over this? Destroy people's lives? Jessica has 2 kids at home. I've got a family, a mortgage. His voice cracked. We made a mistake. Yes, a terrible mistake. But does it really deserve this level of punishment? Rosa Mae leaned against her car door. The metal was warm from the afternoon Sunday. She'd been having this conversation in one form or another for 40 years, always with someone who'd wronged her, asking for mercy they'd never shown. Tell me something, David, she said. What would have happened if I'd been exactly who you thought I was? A poor old black woman from the wrong side of town with delusions about having money? He shifted uncomfortably. We would have helped you understand. You would have called security, Rosa Mae interrupted. You would have had me escorted out, possibly arrested for attempted fraud. Isn't that right? David's silence was answer enough. You would have humiliated me completely, she continued. Made sure everyone in that bank knew I was just another crazy old woman who didn't belong. You would have made me a story you told at dinner. You won't believe what happened at work today. The truth of it hung between them like smoke. But I'm not who you thought I was, Rosa Mae said. So now you want mercy. You want understanding. You want me to consider your children and your mortgage and your future. She straightened up from the car. At 73, she was still tall, still strong, Still the woman who'd built an empire one rental property at a time. Did you consider mine? Before David could answer, another car pulled into the lot. A sleek black BMW with tinted windows. It parked 2 spaces away, and a woman in an expensive suit got out. Mrs. Washington? The woman's voice was crisp and professional. I'm Sarah Chin, regional manager for First National. I drove down as soon as I got your call. David's face went from pale to ashen. Regional manager? Hello, Sarah, Rosa Mae said warmly. Thank you for coming so quickly. Sarah Chin was everything David Mitchell wasn't. Older, more experienced, someone who understood that respect was earned, not assumed. She'd worked with Rosa Mae before on commercial loan agreements, had always treated her with the courtesy due a successful businesswoman. I understand there was an incident today, Sarah said. You could call it that. Rosa Mae's tone was mild, but David could hear the steel underneath. Sarah turned to David with the kind of look that ended careers. Mr. Mitchell, I think we need to talk. Ma'am, I can explain. Inside, Sarah said. Now, as they walked back toward the bank, Rosa Mae called after them. Sarah, I'll be in touch about the lease renewal. Soon, Sarah nodded without turning around. David stumbled slightly, like a man walking to his execution. Rosa Mae watched them disappear through the bank's back entrance. Then she got in her car and drove home to Maple Street. The house looked the same as always. White clapboards siding with green shutters. A front porch with rocking chairs where she sat on summer evenings. Flower beds that she tended herself because she liked the work and trusted her own hands more than any landscaper. It wasn't the biggest house in town or the fanciest, but it was hers. Had been hers since 1985 when she'd scraped together enough money for a down payment while working 2 jobs and raising 3 kids alone. The neighbors thought she was just Rosa Mae from down the street. The woman who brought casseroles when someone was sick and organized the annual block party. They had no idea she owned half the rental properties in their neighborhood. No idea that the quiet woman who grew the best tomatoes on Maple Street was worth nearly $5 million. She preferred it that way. Inside, the house smelled like lemon oil and the lavender sachets she kept in all the closets. Family photos covered the mantelpiece. Her children at graduation, her grandchildren at Christmas, her late husband, Marcus, in his Army uniform from Vietnam. Marcus had died 8 years ago, but his presence still filled the house. His favorite chair by the window, his coffee mug that she couldn't bring herself to put away, his voice in her memory, saying what he'd said every time someone underestimated her. Show them who you are, Rosa Mae. Show them what you're made of. She'd shown them today. All right. The phone rang as she was putting on a pot of coffee. The caller ID showed a number she recognized. Her accountant's office. Rosa Mae, it's Bill Hartwell. I just got off the phone with someone from First National Bank. A Sarah Chin? She was asking about your financial standing. Rosa Mae settled into Marcus's chair with her coffee. And what did you tell her? The truth. That you're one of our most successful clients. That your business portfolio is rock solid and your credit is spotless. Bill's voice carried a hint of curiosity. Mind if I ask what this is about? Just a little misunderstanding at the bank today. Bill chuckled. Must have been some misunderstanding. This Sarah Chin sounded like she was putting out a fire. Maybe she is, Rosa Mae said. After she hung up, Rosa Mae sat in the quiet house and thought about the day, about David Mitchell's shocked face when he realized his mistake, about Jessica's tears, about the other customers who'd watched the whole thing unfold. Part of her felt satisfaction at their comeuppance, justice even, but part of her felt something else, something she couldn't quite name. At 6 o'clock, her daughter Carmen called from Atlanta. Mama, how was your day? Interesting, Rosa Mae said. I had to go to the bank. Everything okay with your accounts? Everything's fine. The bank, on the other hand, she told Carmen the whole story about the withdrawal request and the disrespect and the moment when everything changed. Carmen was quiet for a long moment after Rosa Mae finished. Then she said, Mama, what are you going to do? About what? The lease, the report to corporate. You could destroy those people. Rosa Mae looked out the window at her neighbor's yard. Mrs. Peterson was watering her roses, the same as she did every evening. Simple, predictable, peaceful. I could, she agreed. But will you? That was the question, wasn't it? Rosa Mae had the power now, had the evidence and the connections and the financial leverage to ruin David Mitchell and Jessica and anyone else who'd been part of today's humiliation. The question was, what she'd do with that power. I don't know yet, she told her daughter. I'm still thinking about it. Well, whatever you decide, I'm proud of you. Daddy would be too. After Carmen hung up, Rosa Mae sat in the growing darkness and remembered something Marcus used to say. Power isn't about what you can do to people, Rosa Mae. It's about what you choose to do. The next morning, she woke to find a car in her driveway. Not just any car, a police cruiser. She wrapped her robe around herself and opened the front door. Officer Johnson stood on her porch, hat in hand. She'd known Tommy Johnson since he was 10 years old and used to mow her lawn for pocket money. Morning, Mrs. Washington. Sorry to bother you so early. No bother, Tommy. What can I do for you? Got a complaint from the bank downtown. Someone saying you might have threatened them yesterday? Made some kind of extortion demands? Rosa Mae stared at him. After everything that had happened, after all the disrespect and humiliation, someone at the bank had called the police on her. Extortion, she repeated slowly. Tommy looked uncomfortable. Now, I told them this sounded crazy. I said, that's Rosa Mae Washington. She's been in this town longer than most of us have been alive. But my sergeant said I had to come check it out. Rosa Mae felt something cold settle in her stomach. This was how it worked, wasn't it? She'd shown them who she really was, proven her worth, demanded respect, and their response was to try to make her the criminal. Tommy, she said carefully, do you know what happened at the bank yesterday? Just what they told me. Something about you making threats over a lease agreement. Rosa Mae looked at this young man she had watched grow up. This boy whose mother she had brought soup to when he had pneumonia. This kid she had helped with his homework when his parents were working double shifts. Would you like to come in for coffee? She asked. I think there are some things you need to know. As Tommy stepped into her living room, Rosa Mae realized the battle was far from over. Yesterday had been just the opening move. Someone at First National Bank had decided to fight back. They decided that a black woman with money and power was more dangerous than a black woman without them. They were about to learn just how right they were. Tommy Johnson sat at Rosa Mae's kitchen table with a cup of coffee growing cold in his hands. His face had changed 3 times in the last 10 minutes. From skeptical to shocked to angry. They said you threatened them, he repeated. Mrs. Washington, that's not what happened at all. Rosa Mae set down the folder of documents she'd shown him. Bank statements, property deeds, business licenses. The same papers that had shocked David Mitchell yesterday. That's exactly what happened, Tommy. I told them the truth about who I am, and now they want to make me the criminal. Tommy shook his head slowly. He'd seen this before in his 5 years as a police officer. Rich people calling the police on black folks for existing in spaces they thought they owned. But this was different. This was Rosa Mae Washington, a woman who'd given him cookies after school and helped pay for his police academy books when money was tight. Who filed the complaint, he asked. I don't know. Your sergeant didn't tell you? Just said it came from First National Bank. Someone in management. Tommy's jaw tightened. Mrs. Washington, I need to ask you something straight. Did you threaten anyone? Say anything that could be interpreted as a threat. Rosa Mae thought back to yesterday, to David's pale face and Jessica's tears, to her words about the lease renewal and the report to corporate. I told them I owned their building, she said. I told them the lease was up for renewal and that I'd be reporting their behavior to corporate headquarters. I told them market rates had gone up. That's not a threat. That's business. I know that. You know that. But apparently someone at that bank thinks a black woman owning property and running businesses is some kind of crime. Tommy finished his coffee and stood up. Mrs. Washington, I'm going to go back to the station and talk to my sergeant. This complaint is garbage, and I'm going to tell him so. Be careful, Tommy. These people have money. They have connections. They can make trouble for you, too. Tommy paused at the door. You know what my mama always told me? She said the measure of a person isn't how they treat people who can help them. It's how they treat people they think can't hurt them. He looked back at Rosa Mae with something like pride in his eyes. Sounds like you taught those bank people a lesson they needed to learn. After Tommy left, Rosa Mae called her lawyer. Patricia Hendricks had been handling Rosa Mae's legal affairs for 12 years. Real estate transactions, contract negotiations, business incorporation. She was sharp, expensive, and didn't suffer fools. Rosa Mae, I just got the most interesting phone call, Patricia said without preamble. Someone from First National Bank asking about your mental competency. Rosa Mae felt ice form in her stomach. My what? They wanted to know if you'd ever been declared mentally incompetent, if there were any concerns about your ability to make financial decisions, if your family had ever sought to have you declared unfit to manage your own affairs. The room seemed to tilt. This was worse than the police complaint. This was an attack on her very identity, her independence, her right to exist as a functioning adult. What did you tell them? I told them that questioning the mental capacity of a woman who built a multi-million-dollar business empire from scratch was the stupidest thing I'd heard all year, and that any further inquiries about my client's competency would result in a harassment lawsuit. Rosa Mae sank into Marcus's chair. Her hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from rage so pure it felt like electricity in her veins. They're trying to have me declared incompetent, she said. They're trying to find some way to invalidate what happened yesterday. If they can prove you're mentally unfit, they can claim the lease agreements are void, that your property ownership is questionable, that everything you said and did was the product of an addled mind. Can they do that? Not without a fight. Patricia's voice had turned sharp as a blade. But Rosa Mae, this is war now. They're not just trying to embarrass you. They're trying to destroy you completely. After she hung up with Patricia, Rosa Mae sat in the quiet house and tried to process what was happening. 24 hours ago, she'd been a respected businesswoman making a simple bank transaction. Now she was fighting for her sanity, her reputation, and her right to own property. The doorbell rang at 2 o'clock. Through the peephole, she saw Sarah Chin standing on her porch. Rosa Mae opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Mrs. Washington, I need to speak with you. About what? About David Mitchell and Jessica Torres and what happened yesterday. Sarah looked tired, older than she had in the parking lot, like she'd aged 5 years overnight. They've been suspended pending investigation, she said. Both of them. Rosa Mae felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was overshadowed by everything else that was happening. And the police complaint, the questions about my mental competency. Sarah's face flushed. That wasn't authorized by corporate. That was overzealous management trying to protect themselves. Overzealous. Rosa Mae tasted the word. Is that what we're calling it? Mrs. Washington, I want to make this right. Tell me what it will take. Rosa Mae studied the younger woman's face. Sarah Chin seemed genuine, seemed like someone who understood that yesterday had been a disaster of epic proportions. But appearances could be deceiving. You want to make it right, Rosa Mae asked. Then answer me this. If I hadn't been who I am, if I really had been just a poor old black woman with delusions about money, what would have happened to me? Sarah looked away. You would have been asked to leave after being humiliated, after being made to feel small and stupid and worthless. Yes, and if I'd persisted, if I'd demanded my rights as a customer, security would have been called. And then Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. You might have been arrested. Rosa Mae nodded. For trying to access money that was mine all along. Mrs. Washington, I can't change what happened. I can only try to fix what happens next. How? Sarah reached into her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Full apologies from corporate headquarters. Disciplinary action for everyone involved. Sensitivity training for the entire staff. She paused. And a formal offer to purchase the building at above market value if you'd prefer not to renew the lease. Rosa Mae almost laughed. You want to buy me out? We want to make amends by erasing me from the equation entirely. Sarah's silence was answer enough. Rosa Mae thought about Marcus, about what he'd say if he were here, about the difference between justice and revenge, about the responsibility that came with power. Sarah, let me ask you something. In your professional opinion, what's the real problem here? I'm not sure I understand. The real problem isn't David Mitchell or Jessica Torres. They're symptoms. The real problem is a system that looks at a woman like me and automatically assumes I don't belong, that sees my face and my dress and my age and decides I'm not worth respecting. Sarah nodded slowly. You're right. So how do we fix that? With apologies and buyouts and corporate training sessions that everyone will forget in 6 months? What would you suggest? Rosa Mae looked past Sarah to the street where she'd lived for 40 years, where she'd raised her children and built her businesses and proven every day that she belonged, where neighbors still saw her as just Rosa Mae from down the block. I want to tell you a story, she said, about a young woman who came to this town in 1975 with 3 babies and $50 to her name, about how that woman worked double shifts and saved every penny and bought her first rental property with money she earned cleaning office buildings at night. Sarah listened without interrupting. That woman faced down landlords who tried to cheat her, and contractors who thought they could overcharge her, and city council members who didn't think someone like her should be buying property in their neighborhoods. Rosa Mae's voice grew stronger as she talked. She built something real, something solid, something that would last long after she was gone. And she did it while people who looked like David Mitchell and Jessica Torres told her she didn't belong. Mrs. Washington, I'm not finished. Rosa Mae's tone brooked no argument. That woman is 73 years old now. She's proven herself 1,000 times over. She owns more property than most of your corporate board members. She pays more in taxes than they make in salary. Sarah waited. And yesterday, in the bank she's been loyal to for 15 years, she was treated like a criminal for trying to access her own money. The truth of it hung between them like a challenge. So you tell me, Sarah, how do we fix that? How do we make sure it never happens again? Not just to me, but to the next person who doesn't look like what you think wealth and success should look like? Before Sarah could answer, another car pulled into the driveway. This one Rosa Mae didn't recognize. A white sedan with government plates. 2 men in dark suits got out and walked toward the porch. Mrs. Washington. The older one showed her a badge. I'm Agent Morrison, FBI. We'd like to ask you some questions about your financial activities. Rosa Mae felt the world shift beneath her feet. The police complaint had been bad enough. The questions about her mental competency had been worse. But the FBI? What kind of questions? She asked. The kind that might be better discussed privately. Sarah Chen had gone pale. Mrs. Washington, I think you should call your lawyer. Agent Morrison smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. That's certainly her right, though I should mention that we're here because of some concerning reports about potential money laundering and tax evasion. The words hit Rosa Mae like physical blows. Money laundering, tax evasion, federal crimes that could destroy everything she'd built and land her in prison. I think, she said carefully, that someone at your bank has made a very big mistake. Sarah looked like she might be sick. Agent Morrison's smile widened. That's what we're here to find out. Rosa Mae Washington had face down A lot of powerful men in her 73 years, but none of them had worn FBI badges. I'm calling my lawyer, she said. Agent Morrison nodded. That's your right. But Mrs. Washington, the sooner we clear this up, the better for everyone involved. Patricia Hendricks arrived in 20 minutes, moving faster than Rosa Mae had ever seen her move. Her usually perfect hair was windblown, and her suit jacket was wrinkled, like she'd thrown it on in her car. Don't say another word, she told Rosa Mae. Then she turned to the agents with the kind of smile lawyers used when they were about to draw blood. Gentlemen, I'm Mrs. Washington's attorney. What exactly are you investigating? Agent Morrison consulted his notes. We received reports of suspicious financial activity, large cash deposits, property purchases that don't match reported income, possible structuring of transactions to avoid federal reporting requirements. Patricia's expression didn't change, but Rosa Mae saw her hands tighten on her briefcase. And who filed these reports? I'm not at liberty to say. Of course you're not. Patricia's voice was ice-cold professional. Do you have a warrant? This is a voluntary interview. Then we're done here. Patricia turned to leave, then stopped. Unless, of course, you'd like to explain to your supervisor why you're investigating a 73-year-old businesswoman based on what I'm guessing are completely fabricated allegations. Agent Morrison's partner, who'd been silent until now, spoke up. Mrs. Hendricks, your client has over $3 million in bank deposits. She owns multiple properties across 3 counties. Her reported income from legitimate sources doesn't account for this level of wealth. Patricia smiled. Doesn't it? Have you seen her tax returns for the past 30 years? Her business incorporation documents? Her property acquisition records? The agents exchanged glances. Because I have, Patricia continued. Right here in my briefcase, every penny accounted for, every transaction documented, every tax return filed on time and in full. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. Would you like to see the documentation for her construction company, the one that's built half the subdivisions in North County? Or perhaps the rental property records showing 30 years of steady income growth? Agent Morrison looked less confident than he had 5 minutes ago. What about her restaurant? Patricia continued. Sweet Magnolias has been serving the community for 12 years. Every health inspection passed, every tax return filed, every employee properly documented. Rosa Mae watched the agents' faces change as Patricia systematically destroyed their case before it could begin. Let me save you some time, gentlemen, Patricia said. My client is a legitimate businesswoman who built her wealth through hard work, smart investments, and careful financial planning. She's never been audited, never been investigated, never even had a parking ticket. Agent Morrison closed his notebook. We'll need to verify. You'll need to verify nothing without a warrant or a subpoena. Patricia's voice cut through his words like a sword. And if this investigation proceeds based on the word of people who are clearly retaliating against my client for exercising her legitimate business rights, I will file federal harassment charges against everyone involved. The agents left without another word. Sarah Chen, who'd been standing frozen on the porch through the entire exchange, finally spoke. Mrs. Washington, I am so sorry. This was never supposed to happen. Rosa Mae looked at her with eyes that had seen too much in the past 48 hours. But it did happen. The question is, what you're going to do about it. Anything, whatever it takes to make this right. Rosa Mae walked to her porch railing and looked out at Maple Street, at the neighborhood where she'd raised her children and built her empire and lived quietly for 40 years. At the life someone had tried to destroy because she dared to demand respect. Sarah, let me tell you what's going to happen, she said. You're going back to that bank, and you're going to find out exactly who filed those FBI reports. You're going to find out who called the police. You're going to find out who questioned my mental competency. Sarah nodded frantically. Yes, ma'am. And then you're going to fire them. All of them, not suspend, fire. Mrs. Washington, I'm not sure I have the authority. Then you're going to get someone who does. Rosa Mae's voice was quiet but absolute. Because if you don't, I'm going to do more than raise your rent. She turned to face Sarah directly. I'm going to buy your bank. The words hung in the air like thunder. Mrs. Washington, Patricia said carefully, that would require $47 million. Rosa Mae finished. I looked it up this morning. First National Bank of Millfield is publicly traded. Current market cap is 47 million. I could have the money by close of business today. Sarah's face had gone white. You can't be serious. Dead serious. I've been building wealth for 50 years, Sarah. I know people. I have connections. I can raise $47 million with 3 phone calls. Rosa Mae walked down the porch steps and stood in front of Sarah. At 73, she wasn't as tall as she used to be, but she seemed to tower over the younger woman. Or, she said, we can handle this quietly, professionally, the way it should have been handled from the beginning. What would you want? Full accountability, real consequences, and changes that actually matter. Rosa Mae pulled out her phone and made a call. Carmen, it's Mama. I need you to set up a meeting with your friends at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Yes, the reporters. I have a story they're going to want to hear. She hung up and looked at Sarah. My daughter is an investigative journalist. She knows people at every major newspaper in the Southeast. They love stories about small town corruption and financial institutions that prey on elderly customers. Sarah was shaking now. Mrs. Washington, please, or we can do this the other way. Rosa Mae continued, the right way. Starting with a public apology, not corporate speak, not legal language, a real apology that acknowledges what happened and why it was wrong. Done from you personally, in front of the entire staff and any customers who want to hear it. Sarah swallowed hard. Okay. And a community fund, $100,000 to support minority-owned businesses in this county, administered by a board I choose. I'll have to get approval. You'll get approval because the alternative is $47 million and a hostile takeover that will cost a lot more than $100,000. Rosa Mae was just getting started, and mandatory training, not some corporate diversity workshop. Real education about unconscious bias and systemic racism for every employee, every manager, every board member. Yes, ma'am. And a new policy. Any customer complaint involving potential discrimination gets investigated by an independent third party, not bank employees, real investigators. Sarah was taking notes now, writing as fast as she could. And finally, Rosa Mae said, a memorial. A memorial? In the lobby of that bank, a plaque honoring all the customers who were mistreated over the years because of their race or their class or their age or their gender. All the people who were denied loans they qualified for, all the people who were disrespected and humiliated and told they didn't belong. Rosa Mae's voice grew stronger as she spoke, because what happened to me happens to other people too. People who don't have lawyers and accountants and $3 million in the bank. People who can't fight back. People who just have to take it and walk away. Sarah was crying now. Mrs. Washington, I promise. We'll do all of it. Everything you've asked for. You have 72 hours, Rosa Mae said. If I don't see real action by then, I make those phone calls and this story goes national. After Sarah left, Rosa Mae and Patricia sat on the porch in the late afternoon Sunday. You know, Patricia said you could actually buy that bank if you wanted to. Rosa Mae chuckled. I know. I ran the numbers this morning. Would you really do it? Rosa Mae was quiet for a long moment, watching her neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, water her roses across the street. Life going on as normal, while her world had been turned upside down and right side up again. Marcus used to say that power was like a loaded gun. She finally said, it's not about whether you're willing to pull the trigger. It's about whether people believe you will. 3 days later, Rosa Mae walked into First National Bank of Millfield for the second time that week. But this time was different. Sarah Chen was waiting in the lobby with the entire staff. David Mitchell was there too, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Jessica Torres stood beside him, her eyes red from crying. Mrs. Washington, Sarah said, her voice carrying to every corner of the bank. On behalf of First National Bank and everyone here, I want to offer you our deepest, most sincere apology. The lobby had filled with people, bank employees, customers, curious townspeople who'd heard something was happening. Rosa Mae recognized faces from all over Millfield, people who'd known her for years without knowing what she'd built. What happened to you on Monday was inexcusable, Sarah continued. It was rooted in prejudice and ignorance, and it has no place in our institution or our community. She gestured to a plaque that had been mounted on the wall beside the teller windows. Bronze letters on black marble that read, "In memory of all those who were denied dignity, respect, and equal treatment, we pledge to do better. We're implementing immediate changes," Sarah said. New training programs, new oversight procedures, new leadership. She looked directly at Rosa Mae. And we're establishing the Rosa Mae Washington Community Development Fund with an initial donation of $100,000 to support minority-owned businesses in our area. The applause started quietly and grew louder. Rosa Mae looked around at all the faces, some ashamed, some proud, some simply amazed to discover that the quiet woman from Maple Street was someone worth applauding. David Mitchell stepped forward. "Mrs. Washington, I owe you a personal apology. My behavior was unprofessional and prejudiced. I judged you by your appearance and your address, instead of treating you with the respect every customer deserves." His voice cracked. "I've been suspended without pay for 6 months and ordered to complete extensive sensitivity training before I can return to work." Jessica Torres was next. "Mrs. Washington, I'm sorry I laughed. I'm sorry I was part of making you feel unwelcome in a place where you should have been treated with honor." She wiped her eyes. "I'm enrolling in community college to study African American history and social justice. I want to understand how I became someone who could treat another person that way." Rosa Mae listened to it all with the dignity that had carried her through 73 years of life. When they were done, she walked to the center of the lobby and looked around at the faces watching her. 50 years ago, she said, her voice clear and strong, I couldn't have walked through the front door of this bank. 25 years ago, I might have gotten through the door, but I wouldn't have been welcome. She paused, letting that sink in. This week, I discovered that even in 2025, even as a successful businesswoman with millions of dollars and decades of community involvement, I could still be judged by the color of my skin and the neighborhood I call home. The lobby was completely silent. But I also discovered something else, she continued. I discovered that change is possible, that institutions can learn and grow, that people can confront their prejudices and choose to be better. She looked at David Mitchell, then at Jessica Torres, then at all the faces around her. The question isn't whether we've all made mistakes. We have. The question is what we do next, how we use those mistakes to build something better. Rosa Mae walked to the teller window where it had all started, the same marble counter where she'd been humiliated 3 days ago, where she'd pulled out the papers that changed everything. "I'd like to make another withdrawal," she said to the young man behind the counter. A different teller this time, someone who looked at her with respect from the very first moment. "Of course, Mrs. Washington. How much would you like to withdraw today?" $1,000, she said. "In hundreds, please." As the teller counted out the money, Rosa Mae thought about power and justice and the difference between punishment and redemption. She thought about Marcus and what he'd say if he could see her now. She thought about the young woman who'd come to this town 50 years ago with 3 babies and $50, determined to build something that would last. The teller handed her the money with a smile. "Is there anything else I can help you with today, Mrs. Washington?" "No," she said, putting the bills carefully in her purse. "I think that takes care of everything." As she walked toward the door, the entire lobby erupted in applause. Real applause this time, not the polite clapping from earlier, but the kind of applause reserved for someone who'd fought a battle that needed fighting and won it in a way that lifted everyone up. Rosa Mae paused at the door and looked back one last time at the plaque on the wall that would remind future customers and employees about dignity and respect, at the faces that had learned something about assumptions and prejudice and the cost of both, at a bank that would never again mistake a customer's worth for their appearance. She walked out into the afternoon sunshine and got in her modest sedan. As she drove home to Maple Street, she passed the construction site where Washington Construction was building another subdivision. Past the restaurant where Sweet Magnolias served the best fried chicken in 3 counties. Past the rental properties that had funded her children's educations and her grandchildren's college funds and her quiet philanthropy that most people never knew about. She pulled into the driveway of the White House with green shutters where she'd lived for 40 years, where she'd raised her family and built her empire and proven, one day at a time, that she belonged exactly where she was. Inside, she sat in Marcus's chair and called Carmen. Mama, how did it go? It went well, baby, real well. Are you satisfied with how it ended? Rosa Mae looked around her living room at the family photos and the flowers from her garden and the life she'd built with her own hands and her own determination, at the proof that respect, once demanded, could transform everything it touched. Yes, she said, I think your daddy would be proud. Outside, Mrs. Peterson was watering her roses again, the same as she did every evening. Simple, predictable, peaceful. But now everyone knew that the quiet woman in the White House with green shutters was someone worth knowing, someone worth respecting, someone who'd shown an entire town that justice was possible, even when it seemed impossible. Someone who'd kept her promise to Marcus all those years ago to show them who she was and what she was made of. The phone rang. Another business call, probably. Another property to buy or tenant to manage or opportunity to consider. Rosa Mae Washington, businesswoman and property owner and force of nature, picked up on the second ring. Good evening, she said. How can I help you? Comment for part 2.